Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter, and today on the show, we're talking about UFC 305. It's a pay-per-view. It's going down from the RAC Arena in Western Perth, Australia. I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see this card play out. We've got good fights. We've got a bunch of relevant fighters, a bunch of, interesting style clashes. So I'm excited to break it all down. And we can't do it alone for Bets and Banter. We got a great guest. Our guy has been taping fights all day. He's on absolute soldier hours. NarcoCop MMA, one of the sharpest in the business. We appreciate you being here, my brother. How are you?
What's up, Liam? Thanks for having me, bro. Pleasure being here. I haven't been on a podcast with you for a while, I think, but it's nice to be back. Let's see. I like this card, actually. I think it's a pretty good pay-per-view card. Obviously not the best, but there's some good matchups on this card, actually.
You're darn right about that, my man. A lot of times you see that they'll do like a good one or two at the top, and then it really thins out even on the main card for some of these pay-per-views. But I'm inspired by the pay-per-view offering, right? The main card is 5 pretty solid fights with, stakes in the divisions and for their careers. So I'm excited about that aspect of it. And we got an interesting debutant in the first fight of the night. So that's where we'll start, my brother. We got Stewart Nicoll taking on Jesus Aguilar. It's going down at 125 pounds here. And honestly, I thought Stewart Nicoll looked pretty solid on tape, but it's hard to say, right? He's not facing a very high level of competition. He's on the Australian regional scene, and that can be a little bit hit and miss, right? We get guys off the Australian regional scene that do very well. We get some that come in and they're a little bit below par, right? I look at Stewart Nicoll and what his skill set is. And if you watch, he's a wrestler pretty constantly in his fights. He's looking to take people down, and he's a grappler by trade, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, black belt. He does a lot of interesting wrestling things, like uncommon, right? Like foot disruptions, almost like a J-Flow judo. Talks about a lot of these things like off balance the foot, then reach for the single leg, and these kind of things where it's not as much about strength and physicality. I don't know that he's the most physical fighter, but he does a lot of things very technically. And once he gets on top, the things that I really do like, I always talk about the best position in MMA is if you can hit somebody down from the back. Because if you're on their back, but you're facing up towards the ceiling, you can't be effective with your offense. You just have to look for chokes, try and hold them in position. Honestly, you tire your legs out a little bit with the body lock. But if you can go hips down, becomes devastating. And that's what he does in almost all of his fights. Tries to go hip down as often and as early as possible. And I think that against Jesus Aguilar, he's a good grappler in terms of his guillotine is pretty solid. He's got an ability to stay scrambling and stay offensive, but he makes a lot of mistakes on the ground as well. He gives up some bad positions, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see him get caught in a bad spot. Once again, it's cost him before in his career. He's given up his back before. Tatsuro Taira is basically doing a jiu-jitsu seminar all over him, and I just think that this guy, Stewart Nicoll, the reason the line exploded is just people watching his tape, and they're like, he could probably exploit Aguilar. That's where Aguilar's best skill is in the grappling. So if somebody takes it there and they're better, they could probably get the jump on him. But he does have the better experience against better quality competition. Win against Edgar Chairez in round 5. He's got solid cardio. How do you feel about this debutant? Do you think he gets it done? And do you think there's any value to be had on the props here?
Yeah, so this was an interesting fight at first. I looked at it early, and I saw this guy, Stewart Nicoll. And, he has pretty good wrestling, not bad, good jiu-jitsu. Apparently, he's the jiu-jitsu instructor in his gym. So, I look at him and I say, okay, this guy has pretty decent grappling. He's kind of taking guys down a good amount, getting their back, he's got decent ground and pound as well. But here's a couple of things that I noted, and I think these are really important, honestly. And to everybody like watching out there, I think this in particular is very important. So you see a guy in Stewart Nicoll, right? He's 8-0, and he's fighting in Australia, right? Australian regional scene. Now, here's what I don't like. First of all, his opponents are absolutely horrible, right? There's no one on that ledger that's anywhere near being okay even, right? They're not good fighters at all. But why is this guy fighting only in Queensland, Liam? He's not fighting on Hex. He's not fighting on Eternal MMA. Those are the two promotions in Australia that are like, the bigger ones, right? He's fighting on a promotion that literally no one's heard of. It's in only beatdown promotions, only in Queensland. He's only fought in Queensland, which is extremely weird, right? He's never ventured to Eternal MMA or Hex. Like, why not? If you look at all the prospects that have came to the UFC, every single one of those guys on this card have fought on Eternal or Hex. All of them, except this guy. And it's like, to me, that's a red flag. Like, why is this guy not fighting a little better competition at these other promotions, right? Okay, the other thing is his striking is not all that good, right? The one fight where he goes 5 rounds, he's pretty tired in round 4 and 5. Like, he's on bottom in round 5, right? All these things factored, and the level of competition, man, the level of competition between what Jesus Aguilar has seen, right? And what this guy's going to give him, it's going to be night and day, honestly. Like, this guy's seen Tyra. He's seen Mendonca's a motherfucker on top early. You know, the guy's big. He's strong. You know, he's hard to deal with early. And, you know, then you got Chairez. Chairez is a good fighter. He's a UFC level fighter. He beat him back and forth war in that fight, right? He put himself in submissions. That's the one thing I hate about him. He's constantly putting himself in bad spots. But honestly, he's an extremely tough guy. He fights out of almost all of these positions. Tyra got him, but Tyra's the next level, you know, grappler. Like, I'm not even going to compare this Nicoll guy to Tyra. So with that being said, 2-1 just doesn't make sense, dude. Like, this guy's beaten nobody. It's a first fight in the UFC. We got a guy that's fought 3 times in the UFC. He's got, what is it, 2 wins in the UFC? He's 2-1, is Aguilar. And he's got 3 fights. He's 2-1. Why in the world is he the plus 200 dog here? Like, I think he's the better striker, possibly, Aguilar. It's crazy. It's crazy as it sounds. He might be the better striker. He has more power for sure on the feet. So it's like plus 200 just does not make sense here, man. And, you know, we talk about setup fights and we talk about all that stuff, but I doubt this is one of that case with this Stewart Nicoll guy. There's nothing on tape that shows me, wow, this guy's some huge prospect, right? So, yeah, I really like Aguilar here at plus 200. I mean, makes no sense to me why this line's where it is.
Yeah, I think from a money line standpoint, I agree with you. You know, you have a guy, like you mentioned, he's the younger fighter and he's got more professional experience, more UFC experience, found a way to grit out a decision. I think the controversy around that decision is part of the reason people are a little bit skeptical of Jesus Aguilar. He doesn't win a lot of minutes at times. Like, even I think the Arison Ferreira fight, he was kind of giving up some minutes and then ended up, you know, submitting him late in that fight. So he's kind of that guy that always finds a way to, you know, get somebody, whether it's round 3, round 5, I think it was against Chairez. He tracks him down late at times. I do think you're right to point out Stewart Nicoll in his 5-round fight. He was starting to give up the top position to his opponent in rounds 4 and 5. And honestly, he made a couple like critical mistakes in that fight overall in terms of control. That guy, the only difference I would say is he's just big. That guy that he was fighting in that case, it was one of the only big guys that he fought. And Chairez is another small guy. So for me, it does feel like there's going to be a lot of competitive scrambling. I think somebody asked in the chat, I'm looking to see if, my guy Glinbot says, what do you think of the fight ends by sub? I do not hate that look at all. You know that Chairez is basically like selling out for his guillotines. The one guy Aguilar, excuse me. I literally did that on the Roto Grinder show earlier as well.
It's okay. You said Chairez twice. I'm like, okay, maybe he just messed up. So I just correct you.
There's certain fighters, Billy Quarantillo and what's his name? Algio. I literally use them interchangeably. I watch too many fights, man. But in any case, I apologize to Jesus Aguilar. I like Jesus Aguilar, right? I actually advocated him beating Mendonca in his last fight just because Mendonca is a guy that slows down and Chairez is a guy that continues to push the pace. But in this fight, I just don't know how to get a great read because what I saw tells me Stewart Nicoll probably makes the more advantageous decisions in terms of where he pursues the fight. Like going for the back take, I'm a guillotine guy myself, but Edgar Chairez oftentimes, Edgar Chairez, I literally did it again. Jesus Aguilar, they both fight the same way too, pulling the guillotine. But Jesus Aguilar, he has this ability to go for it and then end up in bottom position. And I just think this is the wrong guy to implement that game against. So I think he'd be smart to try and just keep this in a position where he sprawls, brawls, and makes this guy tired before he engages in the grappling. That's all I would say if I was coaching him, right? Whereas he's a guy that's not afraid to gunsling with anybody in the grappling. So ends by sub seems very viable to me. I would have to see the price, though. But in any case, we spent plenty of time on this one, my man. We can move to the next one here, where Kenan Song is taking on Ricky Glenn. We'll have you start us off on this one, Narco. It's a really greasy fight. Ricky Glenn hasn't looked good in his last couple, but now he's trying something different at 170. He's a former featherweight. Do you think it works out for him, or how do you see this one going?
Yeah, absolutely not, man. I mean, we know it's a giant red flag when, you're 36 years old and 35 years old and you're moving up finally to 170 pounds when you fought almost all your career at 145. I think he only has 4 fights at 155, and then now he's at 170. He takes this fight, right? He's flying all the way to Australia for this fight, right? It's the last fight of his contract. I listened to his interview, Liam, and I don't know if you listened to it, but there is so many red flags in that interview where he's saying he's basically done. I mean, you have to listen to it. I don't want to say exactly what he was saying, but he's not 1 foot out, but he's 9 toes out. Okay. And he's opening up a gym September 2nd. He made it a point that he's opening up a gym in 2 weeks, his own gym. He said this is the last fight of his contract. He said that he asked him, what happens if you lose? He's like, oh, I'll be done. I'm retiring if I lose. Literally just said that 2 different times in this interview. It's a huge, this whole interview is just a big red flag. And, he's talking about how they asked him, you're moving up to 170, you're facing Kenan Song. He's like, oh yeah, he's much bigger than me. Have you seen my legs? They're chicken legs. He has tree trunks for legs. And I'm like, bro, this guy's basically losing already. It's just funny interview to listen to. But outside of that, forget about interview only. Like, he's looked awful, very, very slow in his last 2 fights. The guy talks about, he also says, this is important. He says he has bad arthritis. So it's very hard to even make it to a fight, he says in his interview, which I think that's important too. It's probably been creeping up lately on him. This guy is 35, but honestly, he's probably 45 in fight years, man. Like, this guy, he looks extremely, extremely slow. Against Dober, it looked like he was literally stuck in sand. Giagos knocked him out and that's the other thing. Both of his last knockouts have been left hooks. Kenan Song's favorite punch is the left hook. That's the one that he dropped Ian Gary with. I mean, he throws a very, very nice left hook, and he's a tank, man. Like, he's a solid 170 pounder. And if Glenn he needs to get this fight to the ground, and I just don't think he can get this fight to the ground. And on the feet, he's absolutely going to get torched. So, looking at Glenn's history, like, the last time he even got a takedown was like 7 or 8 years ago, dude. Like, this guy doesn't even have a takedown for the last, I don't know how many fights. So, yeah, I just think this is an easy fight, honestly, for Song. I think the line is short. I took it early. The line keeps moving up. Some people are saying, well, I don't trust Song at chalk, but it's all about who you're facing, man. Like, this is not the guy. Ricky Glenn is just, I think he's completely done, to be honest. You look at the last couple of guys that he's faced, Song. These guys are all big time kickers. They kicked him a shit ton, destroyed his leg, all 3 of them, So with that being said, I like Song here quite a bit. I think it's probably going to end in KO. Kenan Song, maybe early.
Yeah, we see this fight largely the same way. I just can't get behind Ricky Glenn at this point. Number one, suboptimal weight class. Like, he's not going to be that undersized in terms of the measurables here, but to his own point, it just seems like there's a different level of musculature between the 2 guys, right? Like, one guy is like not going to be able, likelihood to make 155. I was stunned at the beginning of the week when I was doing my first look. I was like, this is at 155. I was like, what happened to Kenan Song? You got hit so hard, he's going to 155, and instead it's the opposite, right? Ricky Glenn is going up to 170. I was like, wow, bad idea. And I think that Kenan Song could hurt him. The other thing is he's got a shocking 9 wins via submission on his resume. The one thing I would be afraid of is the club and sub. If you were on the plus 145 KO, I wonder what the ITD is relative. The sub is plus 1100. I'm seeing, for Kenan Song. I don't think he's necessarily a better grappler, but to your point, if Ricky Glenn's basically checked out and looking for, one final check on the way out of a UFC career, honestly, I would be like, hey, here's the neck, brother. Get me out of here and don't punch me in the face no more. I'm trying to open a gym in 2 weeks. I don't need a black eye. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. I don't trust Ricky Glenn right now. I think he's won 3-1 in his last couple of fights. And honestly, if Grant Dawson hadn't had cardiac arrest, then he wouldn't have had that draw. And I bet him there, right? And I had advocated him all week. I was like, I think Grant Dawson might go into cardiac arrest late. The thing about Kenan Song is he might lose in the 3rd round, but to your point, it's attritional beatdowns from guys that are good, right? Like he's fought a pretty decent quality of competition, and he's been favored over guys at times when they weren't quality, and he beat him. So I think that Kenan Song can go out there and get a win here. And I think they're saying, hey, thanks for doing us those favors. Here's a Ricky Glenn on the last fight of his contract. Next up, my man, we've got Tom Nolan taking on Alex Reyes, and kind of irresponsible matchmaking, if you ask the folks on Twitter, and I would include myself in that, right? You look at a guy like Alex Reyes and hasn't gotten a win in quite some time. I do think there's not many easy outs in the UFC's lightweight division, right? It's a very killer division. And so unless they're going to give him a grappler and just see how that goes, this is one of the more beatable strikers in the UFC. We've seen that, right? He goes out there and takes a lot of risk, doesn't have great defense, but he's more powerful. He's younger. He's a lot closer to his athletic prime. You'd assume he's going to win for those reasons, but the line does seem a little bit cost prohibitive, right? For a guy who's just getting, into rock'em sock'em robots, crazy swinging matches with the lower end of the division. He's got the physical tools to be all right. And I've even seen decent grappling fundamentals from him when guys shoot takedowns, sprawl out, look for the front headlock, things like that. But again, it was on the Australian regional scene, and he's a big, long guy. I do worry about what would happen if he gets taken down and extended in positions. Those guys tend to be a little bit more frail on the ground, but I just haven't seen anything from Alex Reyes to say that he's going to win a fight at this point in his career, right? He looks like he's a little bit past it, but he's still in the gym training. He still looks like he's around solid fighters. So I don't want to rule him out completely. It's just, when you haven't gotten a win in 7 years, it's very hard to, put a lot of stock into somebody. How do you feel about this one, Narco?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty shitty matchmaking, to be honest. Like, I'm pretty sure this is probably the last fight of Reyes' contract. He doesn't have a single UFC win. He's only fought, twice in a matter of God knows how many years. It's insane that this guy only has 2 fights in 7 years, man. This guy was in very, very bad shape, near death, I believe. It was very, very bad. He found himself back in the cage after like 6 years, right? Only to get brutally knocked out against Cannonball. But the one thing I will say in that fight, and I taped that this morning, I'm kind of surprised how he took all those shots from Cannonball there. Like, he took a shitload of big shots from him, and he was taking them pretty damn good. Like, I was honestly shocked how many of these shots he took flush shots. And we know Charlie Campbell hits pretty damn fucking hard, so he took a lot of flush shots. Not that that's a good thing, obviously. His defense on the feet is not good. Even in the regional scenes, like before the UFC, he was getting absolutely destroyed on the feet many times, right?
The Reyes family focuses on offense, my brother.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is his offense is not even all that good. You know what I'm saying? So that's the issue. But, I mean, how are we going to advocate Nolan here? Minus 1,100, like, to a guy that, like you said, rock'em sock'em robots every damn fight, getting knocked out in one, dropped in the other. I mean, even last fight, like, getting dropped was a terrible, terrible look. Like, Tom Nolan, what are you doing, dude? They gave you literally a layup and you get dropped in that fight. Not a good look. And on top of it, if you remember, the dude came in, the Brick had a bad knee injury. He had a whole sleeve. I think he had something torn in his knee, and he fought with a torn knee, and he still dropped Nolan in that fight. So, yeah, I mean, Reyes is done. You know, I don't think he has much of a chance here. Maybe something crazy early he lands. Just go for it. You know, just go for it. Swing for the fences and see what happens. You know, this guy got dropped before and finished. That's probably your only chance, right? He's probably going to intercept him with a knee, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about this fight. It's kind of shitty matchmaking, to be honest.
I mean, I guess the only theoretical case you could make for the guy is, him to win via submission or either guy to win via submission. If you're trying to make the case for Reyes, obviously you could knock out Tom Nolan. We've seen that, but he does have a grappling pedigree of some kind. He's 4-0 career to the submission. And when you've been out for a while and maybe haven't been able to take damage, one of the things a lot of guys tend to work on is their grappling. You've seen it from a guy like Mike Malott. When he was out of the game for a little while, he came back a black belt, started guillotining people, and they weren't expecting it when he first came back. So I think that it's something to keep in mind. Then he's going for leg locks, getting himself finished. So it's the nature of MMA, right? Jiu-jitsu gives and it takes away. But I think of this guy, Alex Reyes, as a guy who's probably got to sell out to grapple here, because you just don't want to get into a swinging match with a guy who should have a little bit better recoverability at his age, at his athletic, prime. But in any case, Tom Nolan, you'll never see me laying chalk at minus 1,000 with a guy who's getting dropped every which way but loose, basically, in all of his fights. And even the Bogdan-Grad fight, he was kind of just swinging and then killed him. And it was a good win, but it didn't tell me like this guy is destined for great things. So he's got all the physical gifts to be a good fighter, but he's got to stop being so reckless and honestly arrogant, right? You could see the arrogance in the Moda fight and it got him killed. And it almost got him spilt again in the last one. And he was able to find his range. So he's just got to, get over that, I think. But in any case, my man, we got Jack Jenkins up next. Jack Jenkins taking on Herbert Burns. And, I had a tweet that popped off that said, if you've only seen his last 3 fights, you would believe that this was an AI-generated image. And it's Herbert Burns knocking out Nate Landwehr with the knee up the middle. I mean, obviously it's a little bit memeish, but the guy goes out there and, he's got all these wins on his regional scene record. He's gone to decision before, losing decisions to talented Russians. You're like, maybe there's something here. And the last couple of fights, he's just quitting time and time again in round 2. Narco, it's crazy. And honestly, I had some hope for him in his last fight. And it's not because I don't rate Julio Arce. I think he's a good fighter. But he goes from 35 to 45. Then he misses weight. I'm like, is he injured? Is he even like showing up for this fight? Herbert Burns goes out there and didn't even look like he was prepared to try and grapple. No attempt at a real takedown. The guy runs a jiu-jitsu gym and looked like he never wrestled in his life. So I can't do it again, I don't think, with Herbert Burns, but I mean, the numbers are huge. It's like 26-1, 24-1 for him to win the fight by submission in the first round. I can't imagine him winning the fight very many other ways except a raised knee up the middle. But man, I can't do it again, I don't think. And for Jack Jenkins, coming back, he's a guy that tends to take his time a little bit out there. Slower finishes, got the finish very late on Contender Series, and he's got good low kicks. He's got an ability to go out there and get takedowns, but I don't think he's a prolific grappler. He's been submitted before on the regional scene. Honestly, Chepe basically broke his arm with a whizzer. Call it whatever you want, but that it's a grappling maneuver, and you kind of got to have your awareness there situationally. People are trying to injure you in a fight, right? John Jones, right off the rip with Glover Teixeira, just ripped his arm apart because he got a little bit lazy in a clinch. It's a fight. You're trying to injure each other. So at the end of the day, I just think Jack Jenkins will learn from that, right? He'll be a little bit more cognizant. Where do I put my arms? Am I getting myself overextended? But he's the guy that just shows a lot more will to win. And for me, that's enough to say he's probably going to get one over on Herbert Burns. It just looks like he's been showing up to fulfill this contract. And I would guess that, if he gets a 4th loss in a row here, that's the end of the contract and he'll be getting a handshake and get the hell out of here. But I think that for Herbert, pride, I thought was going to be on the line last time. That's what I thought. I was like, man, after you get carried out by your brother, you're going to come out and show something better. And he really didn't. So it was devastating, right? I don't know if I can expect better. What do you think, Narco?
Gilbert Burns is done, bro. This is another guy that, coming off a bad knee surgery. I think he's had 2 on one and 1 on the other. He's had a lot of surgeries. Gas tank is absolutely horrible. I mean, we haven't seen too many finishes by exhaustion. We saw it against Bill Algeo, right? Exhaustion to damage or whatever the hell it said on Tapology, which is one of the funniest finishes. That's the fight you're referring to where he gets carried out, right? Horrible look. then, I was with you on the last fight. I'm like, okay, hold on a second. This guy's moving up in weight. Burns is going to grapple, he should get a takedown here early, right? And he can do some work, right? His wrestling looked atrocious, dude. He'd never even sniffed a takedown in that fight. And I'm like, what the heck is this, dude? This guy looks horrible. And then round 2 comes around. He absolutely crumbles like a minute into the round. Like he's done, death gassed, like I'm like, holy fuck, this guy is definitely done. And then now you add the fact, Liam, he took this fight on 2 weeks' notice. He's flying all the way to Australia. You're talking about a guy that already gasses bad. And he takes a fight on 2 weeks' notice, has to fly all the way to Australia. And to be honest, I really like what I see from Jack Jenkins. I think he has very, very solid takedown defense. He's faced very good opposition, honestly. Outside of Sheamus, Chepe Mariscal and Jamal Emmers are very tough matchups early in your career. He went 1-1. The Emmers fight was close. Honestly, he won round 1 versus Chepe. And then, now that we see Chepe is he's a dog, man. He's hard to deal with. So in this fight, I have an actual max bet here. I have 5 units spread across round 1 and round 2 for Jack Jenkins. There's just hardly any scenarios that I see that this guy's going to start. One thing is, even if he doesn't hit him on the feet, he's definitely going to destroy his legs. Like that is guaranteed. Herbert Burns' legs are going to be toast here because Jack Jenkins kicks very damn hard. This guy's knees are toast to begin with. It's not going to take a lot. It's literally not going to take a lot here. So we got a guy that's short notice, gasses, is old. I think this is the last fight of his contract. 3 knockouts in a row. It's got to be. Took it on short notice. Probably just wants a paycheck, in my opinion. Fighting in Australia. This is the first fight back for Jenkins in his home country. The writing is on the wall for me. I spread 5 units between round 1 and round 2 where I Dutched it to win like 3.5 units. So, the odds are like around 120, minus 120. When I ran the numbers, I think Jenkins should finish this fight about 70% of the time in rounds 1 and 2. So I think there's value there. And I think Jenkins, just the youth, the speed, the way better technical striker of the two, just way more athletic in general, So I like Jenkins here quite a bit.
Well, there you have it. A bullish take on the favorite. And honestly, I get where you're coming from. Herbert has looked so bad recently. There's a part of me that always wanted to believe that like he's just going to turn a corner at some point and come back. But you mentioned the surgeries and the things that make it very difficult. When he's a little bit up there in age for this division in particular, right? Featherweight tends to age out a little bit quicker. And I think to myself, he has that small window to work with, but I really don't see him, being willing to fight beyond that, right? That's kind of what we've seen from him in these recent fights, is an unwillingness to fight past the 7.5 minute mark. Shout out to Capping Service. He's on Herbert plus 500, round 1 plus 1,300 for small bets. And I think that's a sound way to look at it as well. If you're looking to get in on the dog side, it's a big ROI and you're hoping that he can go out there and end it quick. And that's basically what he's going to offer you, right? I'm going to go out there. I'm going to try and get this done quickly. And if it don't work out, I'm going to find my way out of here. And respect to him for that. But rooting for your bet, my man. Shout out to our guy, Wick MMA. He thinks that you look like the voice of the UFC, John Anik. So he's giving you the shout there in the chat. Appreciate everybody who's rocking with us. But I think we're safe to move on to this next fight here, where we've got Casey O'Neill taking on Luana Santos in the women's flyweight division. And Narco, I got to say, when I first looked at this fight, I was excited. I think that Luana Santos is an interesting prospect. Last time out, I thought she was going to get a test from Agapova, in the sense that Agapova tends to be pretty violent, comes out early with some aggression on the feet. And I think that this girl is a little bit hittable on the feet. I think she's a little bit awkward as a striker. However, she does have some power. We saw that in the Juliana Miller fight. She was getting hit on the way in against a big girl. She was trying to find her range and then eventually just started exploding with offense. I think that she's got interesting, grappling as well, right? She kind of mixes up where she wants the fight to be. She lost to a good grappler on the regional scene as a big underdog there against Jenna Bishop. But since then, she's been favored 5 times out in LFA and in UFC competition. She's won each and every time. So I'm interested in your thoughts, my man. How do you see this one going down in the women's division?
Yeah, interesting fight. This is it seems to be a lot of short notice people here, because I think Luana's on short notice here. She just fought a month ago. Looked good, obviously. Agapova. I mean, when Agapova came out, she looked so awkward in that fight, honestly. Right when she came out, I'm like, what is she doing, dude? This doesn't look right. And instantly she got judo tossed, and it was all over after that on the ground. But yeah, Casey O'Neill, 2 straight losses. She was looking really good. Undefeated prospect. She was, she's only 26 years old, and she was 9-0. Then comes the speed bump in the road, and she loses to Jennifer Maia, right? In a striking affair where, it's kind of hard to beat Jennifer Maia in a 15-minute striking match, because first, she has good volume. Second, she has actually good striking. And third, she has good cardio. She can throw a lot of volume for 3 rounds. No problem, right? And most of Casey O'Neill's wins have come attritionally, where she pumps out a lot of volume, and eventually her opponents slow down and she takes over, right? In the second half of round 2, and then in round 3. Then came the Lipski fight. And Lipski honestly has looked really, really good lately, man. Her grappling has looked good. Her striking, we know, has always been good. And she has a lot of power for WMMA. And in the beginning of that fight, she hit Casey O'Neill numerous times, and it made Casey O'Neill completely hesitant. It was a completely different fighter after that. And eventually she finished her. Now here, man, like, she gets a girl. I think this is a good matchup in general for Casey O'Neill, in the sense that she gets a girl that's not a very good striker. Her path is probably getting some judo throws and getting this fight to the ground and getting on top. And then the other 2 stuff that are important is she's taking it on short notice, and she's known to have, like, pretty bad cardio. And if you have bad cardio against Casey O'Neill, that's where you can get in trouble, right? So I have a bet on Casey O'Neill at like 130, 139 or something. I just think the cardio is going to be a thing in this fight. I think she's the better striker, honestly, of the 2. But I do think she probably needs to fade some early aggression from Luana Santos. But if she does fade that, I think she might be able to fade Luana Santos out of the fight later. So, yeah, I like Casey O'Neill, a dog, back in her home country, fighting a girl that's on short notice.
Absolute fair play, my man. I think the only thing for me that's a big hang up on the Casey O'Neill side is she had the torn ACL in 2022 against Jessica Ai, and she has not won the fight since then, right? And obviously you made a case for why that is, right? She fought 2 tough girls. Jennifer Maia, I will note, is no longer with the promotion, but it's because she's boring, not because she's not, a talented fighter. And then you look at the Ariane Lipski fight. Lipski went on to lose her next fight to another Brazilian prospect, Karine Silva, but Karine Silva, a little bit more battle tested, been around the block a little bit longer, fought tougher girls for longer. So I think that's all fair notes. The thing about Luana Santos that's interesting to me is, number one, she keeps finding these ways to win, which I like, putting some faith in young fighters still developing, going out there and accepting a challenge like this on short notice. And the one thing I'll note about Casey O'Neill is, right, we can point to, okay, she's had this good run up until, these bad points. But I had some skepticism about Casey O'Neill before she ever got to the UFC, because of the fact she had been knocked out multiple times on the regional scene, which is just uncommon in WMMA, right? To have multiple finish losses on the regionals. And I was like, whoa, like, what happened there? And it was like getting blasted on the chin, which kind of happened to her against Lipski, right? Did she really get out grappled? I mean, yeah, she got out grappled, but it was a result of getting bumped, right? She was getting blasted all over the place. She could have just as easily been TKO'd in that spot. So I think to myself, she's a little bit chinny in WMMA, I feel. And when I look at the UFC, they're pretty sick with their marketing, right? It doesn't mean it always works, right? Oftentimes they go out there with a plan, doesn't come together. But when I see this fight get put together, the way I think about their approach is always like, okay, we got this girl and she was the it girl and then she got injured and things haven't been going so good. So now let's see if this other girl who's shaking her ass on TikTok and got all these followers on Instagram, if she can actually go out there and fight, maybe she can get the jump on her. Maybe she can go hit her with some big punches in round one, create some viral moment. And now we just replace you with this girl, right? And then, it's like you're on 3-loss streak. They don't care about you. They'll just move on. And this girl is on a 4-fight win streak. Now she's the shiny toy. That's the one thing about the UFC marketing machine is there's a no-lose situation here, right? Either Casey O'Neill comes out of it, redemption, shakes off the dust in her home. Oh, yeah, everybody celebrate. Or this new star, she makes a name of herself off Casey O'Neill. So I think they basically have a great spot. The line's close. I think that's fair. You said that you got in at plus 139. It's closed. It's like plus 120 now. And that probably makes some sense. But for me, I do have this sneaking suspicion that Luana Santos probably be losing on some minutes here, getting out volumed a little bit. I think she might be able to connect with a big counter, find her range, get a big throw off, and just find a finishing moment in this spot against a girl who's kind of got to find her footing and doesn't have any momentum right now. The reason she's taking this fight is she's like, this girl's got nothing going for her right now, and I got everything going for me right now. I'm going to take everything she's worked for. And that's the way I see it. So for me, I think Luana's going to get the win here, but I wish you the best of luck on the bet, and I have no bet on the other side, right? Laying WMMA chalk, that's a story that'll have you crying more often than not. But for me, I do see something in Luana Santos as she's gone out there and proven herself a little bit more. But the quality of competition leaves a little something to be desired. I just think it's the grappling with Stephanie Egger that sells me. Egger's not a bad grappler, and she's physical. She's big, and she was out there doing just fine against her. So at 125, I think she's got a good chance of doing that against Casey in this spot. But next up, we've got another interesting fight, my man, where Joshua Culibao is taking on Ricardo Ramos. This is going down in the featherweight division, and Ricardo Ramos just been phoning it in his last couple. My whole write-up for why I thought Arosa was going to win by sub was really soft grappling performance from this guy last time out. And then he went out there and had a very soft grappling performance again. And maybe that'll change here, but I can't back a guy who's going. It's like the Herbert Burns syndrome, except now at plus 120. Because I do think skill for skill, Ricardo Ramos probably the better fighter, right? And maybe from that standpoint, this line has to stay close because he's going to come out in round one, have a pretty decent start, land some power shots potentially. But I think Culibao just has more will to win. I think he's a little tougher. I think he has that dog in him intangibly that I don't see necessarily from Ricardo Ramos at this stage in his career. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this fight. But for me, I feel like you've got skill against will. And, the will is favored at minus 145. The skill is at about plus 125, but he's quitting his last two. How do you feel about this one, my man?
Yeah, kind of the same way. I do think Culibao does have skill, actually. I think his striking is actually really nice. His hands. He's got really good striking. He has a lot of power in his hands, actually. He hurts almost everybody in his fights. He hurt actually Murphy in their fight, and he made Murphy grapple. Murphy got some takedowns. That was the fight that, even off of a loss, that impressed me more than anything on Culibao, honestly, because I think Laron Murphy, now that we know, he's a very, very good fighter, very good everywhere. I mean, when you talk about grappling, he's a good grappler, wrestler. He can wrestle, strike, he can strike. And Culibao was hanging with him in that fight, man. It was a really good fight, back and forth. But Murphy was smart. He relied on the wrestling, and he ended up winning that fight. The one thing that you mentioned, I think that's really important is the dog, right? The dog. Who has the dog in him in this fight? And it's not even close, man. One is a quitter to me, and one will fight life and death. He's just not going to quit. And so when I have two fighters like that, Liam, I'm almost always going to bet, especially at these kind of close lines. I'm always going to bet on the guy that's a dog, man, the guy that's going to fight for my money. Because when I'm putting my money down on somebody, I want him to be fighting out of chokes. I want him to be getting up after being knocked down, not fucking quitting. I mean, this guy literally in that fight against Arosa, he quit, man. He got into this guillotine, never tried to fight hands, never tried. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. How do you just instantly just tap right away?
I will say both guys that just fought Julian Erosa got insta tap by the guillotine. As soon as they were in it, they were like, "Thanks, anyways." I'm out
How
here.
about against
But
Jourdain?
he did it in the Jourdain fight as well.
Exactly.
That's what I was gonna say. No forgiveness, none. Lando Minata lost his pants trying to stay alive.
Dude, brutal, man. Two brutal, like, quit jobs, in my opinion, right? And the one thing that you noticed, at least I noticed with Ramos, is he is the absolute best hammer when he's coming forward and just landing and he's having fun. He's doing these back kicks on your leg. You know how he does that little Brazilian back kick. But then the minute he's on the back foot and they're coming at him, complete panic job. He doesn't know what to do. He shoots these weird takedowns. And if you notice, in the fight against Erosa, he hurts Erosa, gets him down, right? Erosa kicks him off, gets up, starts coming after him, and he throws a couple punches, and then all of a sudden, this guy panic shoots right into a guillotine and taps. And it was, to me, it was like, dude, like, this guy just quit. Literally just quit. He's like, oh, I couldn't finish him? Okay, I'm done. Like, okay. But, you know, I like Culibao in this spot, honestly. I can't bet on a guy, or I love to bet against the guy that's going to quit like this, because I think when you go up against a dog like Culibao, and let's say that Ramos hurts him, Culibao ain't going to quit. He's going to keep coming after you, and he's going to throw back. And I think that's going to make fucking Ramos quit, because I've seen it before. So, yeah, I mean, I like Culibao here. I think he's a better striker. I think his grappling is actually not bad. He's got pretty good takedown defense. The one thing I don't like with Culibao is he does give up his back when he gets up. That's the only thing. And you can't, you got to be careful with Ramos. But I've seen him fight a lot. The guy is hard to sub. He knows what he's doing on the ground. He's not like a complete fish on the ground. So, yeah, I mean, I like Culibao. I think he gets the job done. I think this guy probably gets knocked out or he quits again somehow, some way. I wouldn't even be surprised if Culibao subbed him, to be honest. Like maybe a club and sub. Like I would not be shocked, which would be kind of embarrassing, but who knows?
I wouldn't be stunned. I think it's probably going to be with the strikes, but I do think that anything's possible here. The one thing I will note, look at the guys that have beaten Josh Culibao, right? Danny Silva, dog. Lerone, and I'm not even saying, this is no comment on skills. I'm talking about will to win. Absolute dog. Danny Silva is going to go out there and give everything he's got to win the fight. If it doesn't work out, doesn't work out. He's going to try. Lerone Murphy, absolute dog. There's a reason people have a hard time getting over on this guy. He wants to win really bad. Jalen Turner, literally a welterweight. Like, I'm sorry. That was just a horrible matchup. I said you should have fired your manager, but he got his foot in the door, right? Charles Jourdain, I bet him at plus 365 in that fight. Draw was the worst case scenario. I thought he could have won that fight as well. It was a very solid performance from Culibao. He knocked him down. Think about that as the common opposition, right? How did one guy fare against Charles Jourdain? He quit pretty easily. And obviously, Charles has developed a little bit since then, and he just went down to the bantamweight division. Let's be very cognizant of that fact. Josh Culibao, on the other hand, he's only losing to the dogs, and now he's going out there against a guy who doesn't seem like he wants to be there very much. So it's like, yeah, unless he gets him out of there very quickly, I think something's going to go sideways for him and he's going to give up. So that's the way I see this one. Pretty straightforward. And Culibao inside the distance is like plus 200. I think everybody thinks of him as like a decision guy, but he's got some power in his hands. And I think he understands the assignment here as well, which is you don't want to go 15 minutes with this guy and go technique for technique. You want to put him on the back foot and make him question, why am I even here? And, show him the door, because he's an ATOS black belt, right? You don't want to just stand out there and go trade position for position. He did that with, I think it was Algeo, right? And ended up winning. So he's shown a 15-minute gas tank for doing that kind of fight. You want to hit him, you want to hurt him, and you want to make him second guess himself. There we have it. We agree on that one. Violent agreement there. Next up, my man, we got Junior Tafa taking on Valter Walker. We'll see if we agree on this one. Pick 'em price, my brother. And we've got the big man. It's the battle of the brothers. I put up a post on YouTube today where I got both sets of brothers next to each other, juxtaposed, right? The Walkers or the Tafas. Who comes out victorious? We'll have you start us off, my man.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fight I think nobody wanted. Honestly, I don't know anybody that's really excited for this fight. I mean, after watching Valter Walker in that first fight against Bresky, I mean, probably 4 minutes of gas, and then he was like absolutely dead tired. I don't know what happened, to be honest. He didn't. There wasn't like a lot of grappling early. Maybe it was UFC jitters. It's possible. Like I just don't see how he got tired so damn fast in round one. Right at like the 1 minute mark, he was completely death gassed already, and I was like, wow, this guy really got tired from doing nothing. And that was against Bresky, but now he's facing Tafa. On the feet, obviously Tafa's the better striker by a mile. Valter Walker is just not a good striker. He's pretty bad. He's got maybe some leg kicks, stuff like that, but his hands are pretty awful. His defense is very bad. But honestly, for a big heavyweight, I don't mind his double legs, man. His double legs are actually pretty good, and he's a big dude. His problem is control, though, Liam. He really, and I'm not talking about just the Bresky fight. I'm talking about other regional fights. Nicholson, for instance. Nicholson, who's completely washed at this point in his career, he could not really control Nicholson. Nicholson kept getting back up in that fight. But I think in terms of grappling and maybe, getting someone down and keeping him down there, I think Tafa is a little bit better for him than Bresky was, right? Because Bresky, man, he'll give up his back, he'll do whatever, but he'll work to get back up, right? Tafa just doesn't seem like that. Like, if you flatten him out, it's probably good night. He's not getting up. So it's a kind of a fight where it's obviously, if it stays on the feet, I think Tafa's going to do work. But if Walker has some grappling success, it's going to be his type of fight. So honestly, I have nothing on this fight, but if I was to pick somebody, probably go with Valter Walker, honestly, just because I think if he lands one takedown and is on top, it's probably the round. And I think he can land maybe a takedown or two here. But it's going to be very sketchy on the feet. The other thing is Tafa doesn't really have good cardio either. His cardio is bad too. And just like Walker's is. So it's not like he's going to look fresh like a daisy in round 3 if it gets there. And, Valter Walker's dead tired because he's probably going to be dead tired as well. So, Usman got a couple of takedowns on him. I mean, he defended a lot of them, but I don't think Walker can chain wrestle like Usman did. But I do think Walker's double leg is a lot better. Like, he just blasts you, and he's a big dude. I mean, this guy's a monster. So he does do that blast double leg, and I think he can get him down. It's a matter of if he can flatten him out, I think it's going to be probably the round or maybe even the fight. But, yeah, I'll go with Walker, the grappler here.
Well, unfortunately, we can't end our violent agreement yet, my brother. I'm surprised, right? 70% of Tapology voters are on Junior Tafa here. And I'm also seeing, I did the Roto Grinder show earlier. The projections were, Tafa to be the much higher owned guy in this fight. And you've got a grappler in Valter Walker. Listen, I bet Lukasz Bresky last time out at plus 280, and then I tracked it at plus 230 because I bet it on Caesars and the line moved literally 8 minutes later or something. I was like, well, not going to track that. So I tracked it at a much more commonly available number. And I think he ended up closing like plus 210 or plus 220 in that spot. And ultimately, he barely won the fight. Like, I can say this as somebody who bet Bresky, right? Like, Johnny Walker, this is a comedy moment that I hope that you enjoy. After the fight, quote tweets me saying the scorecards and saying like, yes, like I got my guy. And he's like, look, like even the numbers say like our boy should have won or whatever. And I was like, I think there was a English to Portuguese mistranslation here, my man. Cause I was saying that my guy won the fight, but in any case, he was basically saying like, look at the numbers. Like, we outlanded him and all this stuff. Bresky barely won that fight. And the reason I picked him to win, I was like, all Bresky can do is throw volume over 15 minutes. And I was like, he's going to work back up to his feet, in my view, because that's what he knows how to do. And if you know how to like punish somebody for that, it's a problem. He doesn't know how to punish that. So instead, he just needs to ride people to the ground and go for takedowns over and over. But he's kind of a physical hoss. And the reason I thought Bresky could win is because he's built like a pear. He's kind of a weird guy. And like, he just works back up to that turtle position and stands up. And I was like, he's going to do that and throw some punches. And this guy is going to gas out. And I was like, it's going to be a tough fight. And we know that people will underperform more often than not in a UFC debut. And in that case, it's like, okay, we got a guy, he's never fought anybody serious. The only real guy he's ever fought in his career is Alex Nicholson. So the toughest fight of his career was Lukasz Brzeski. This is probably a slightly easier fight. And whether you think Lukasz Brzeski is like a good fighter or not, he's not dangerous on the feet like Tafa is. I think that's the one thing you got to say. Hey, credit to Tafa. He's a dangerous guy on the feet. He's got some power in the uppercuts. But Usman's a knockoutable guy. Like, he's the guy that's kind of awkward on the feet and very rigid and there to be hit and looks terrible every time he gets hit with a punch. And meanwhile, he's able to just like push him into the cage and mush onto him and keep grabbing a hold of him. And this guy does not wrestle very well. And once he's on bottom, he's like looking at the camera, giving a thumbs down. Like, guy just seems like a zero on the mat, right? And we've seen this in the heavyweight division before. There's a lot of guys that just get away with sometimes you don't wrestle, right? But then any time they wrestle, they look terrible. Greg Hardy, every time he gets on bottom, he's like, it's like he's seeing war flashbacks. His eyes go open all the way, his mouth wide open, his hands open in the air. That's not a great look, right? And I think that when you look at a guy like Tafa, best he can do is hold on, cover up, hope that the guy falls off the top of him. Like, he just doesn't have a great answer from bottom. So to your point, the takedown could be the round. It could be the fight. Like, what happens if this big dude just pushes a knee over the top and he sits on top? Usman doesn't do anything to pass, right? He's a decision nature. This guy might just go, this is the easiest win of my career. If I can get him to the ground once in round one and pass the mount, he's not going to know what to do. I'll hold him down and beat him up and the fight's over. And I think that when you look at Bogdan Guskov and these other guys, they've had some success now in the UFC. Gore MMA, it's not like a total zero gym. So I just think to myself, probably going to be an honest fight. I can see why it's a minus 110 or so, but it's like plus 285 or something inside the distance for Valter Walker. And I get it. Like, Lukasz Brzeski's a finishable opponent for most people, but it's a UFC debut. Let's give the man a chance. And, Johnny Walker, Bogdan Guskov, a serious team in your corner. Maybe you show a better product in the second fight. And everybody's selling stock now. When they told me last time I'm a fool for playing Brzeski and Brzeski has zero chance. Like, dude, haven't you seen he sucks? I'm like, yeah, he's 0-3 in the UFC. He needs a job, right? He's going to fight really hard in this one. And I think that in this fight, you're going to see a motivated version of Valter Walker. He just got embarrassed. And he thought he won that fight too. So should be a good scrap. Next up, my man, we got the Leech, Jingliang, taking on Carlos Prates. And, it's a big plus money price here for the Leech, but he's been out of the cage for a while. He's dealt with some injuries. He's dealt with some surgeries and the like. So I think there's definitely some red flags there on the Carlos Prates side. Still got a lot to prove. This is by far his toughest opponent in the UFC, but another gym that I really respect, Fighting Nerds, guy that's going to go out there and show a pretty complete product. In terms of his striking is dangerous. His grappling used to be a big liability. I think he's gotten a lot better in those positions based on what we've seen in the more recent footage. And I think that overall, he's just a very dangerous fighter in all phases. Is he a great minute winner? Not necessarily, right? He doesn't go out there to throw a huge amount of strikes. He basically picks his shots. And then when he lands, it's a knockdown in the finish. So I think that so far that's worked out well for him. That could always bite you, right? If you just don't get the finish over 15 minutes and the clock expires, you didn't throw enough. But I feel like for Prates here, he's a dangerous guy. He's a young guy on the come up. And I think Leech, he's a guy I really respect. I've bet him before as a dog, but he's beaten a lot of the elder statesmen in the division. And I do worry about what it's going to be like fighting this young kid who's probably not going to give him any respect, and he's huge. So for me, I lean towards Prates here, but it's price prohibitive, obviously. How do you feel, Narco?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you here. I think Leech, he had that very, very bad spine injury, neck area, C5, C6, that caused him to stay basically out of training, out of fighting, out of everything. I have the same injury. I have the exact same injury, C5, C6. I read the whole, they had a big article on him about his injury and where it was and what pain he was feeling. And it's literally exactly what I felt, man. It's, it's in your neck and it goes down your right hand all the way down. And you feel really weak in your shoulder area and all your arm, including your fingers. You get numbness. It's a really bad injury. And mine was, it was through a couple of things, boxing. I got into a car accident as well. And it basically comes from whiplash, or either that, or if you're been cranked on the neck a lot, like wrestling or jujitsu, right? So it's a pretty bad injury. He took a long time. He didn't do any surgery. He didn't do anything. Kind of let time heal it. But the problem with this injury is it never heals. It really doesn't ever heal. it's gonna be an injury where it's probably gonna bother him the rest of his life, you know, especially if you're a fighter and you're grappling and wrestling and doing all that. But you know, he's back, long layoff. The problem is I feel like the Leech had a lot of problems with Neil Magny's length. Neil Magny gave him a lot of trouble with the jab, the 1-2. He couldn't really close the distance well. And, you know, he likes to look down and throw these overhands a lot. The Leech does. And Magny intercepted him with a couple of knees in that fight. The problem is Magny's knees are not quite like Prates' knees. So I can honestly see him getting intercepted with a really nasty knee. He does that a lot to close distance and try to like get his punches home. I think it would behoove him to probably land a lot of leg kicks, inside leg kicks, stuff like that, to kind of get Prates off balance and then maybe come in and throw. But he needs to be on the front foot, man. He cannot be on the back foot because Giles kind of showed the blueprint on how to beat this guy, honestly. Kick his legs, move forward, constantly be on the front foot, pressure this guy, and don't kind of give him room to breathe and teep you and kick you. Because once he starts getting in his groove and he's teeping you and he's kicking you and the left hand is coming, you're in trouble, dude. That once he starts getting in his groove, like he's just going to start picking you apart. So in that fight, the minute he started backing up in round 2, Liam, out cold. He got put out cold with a straight left hand. So what I've seen with Leech lately against D-Rod, who's also a southpaw, against Magny, same thing. He's backing up to the cage. And I think that is the absolute worst thing you could do in this fight. Because if he does that, I'm pretty certain he's going to get knocked out. Because Prates is lethal with all his limbs, man. That's the thing. You don't know where it's coming from. Is it a hand? Is it a knee? Is it a kick? Where is it coming from? And he's whipping all of them. All of them are with, even his teeps are nasty, man. He's like throwing them with power. You know, he's trying to hurt you. So, you know, at this point in his career, Leech is definitely the hardest fight for him. But I just don't know what Leech we're getting here. You know, he's been out, injury, this, that. You know, I think Prates is going to get it done, to be honest. Maybe not early. He's kind of a slow starter, honestly. He kind of like measures people. He's like a little bit of a slow starter. Probably later he might catch Leech because I think his cardio looks good. Leech probably won't grapple. I don't really see this guy grappling, honestly. He's not really going to grapple. Yeah, I mean, I think it's Prates round 2 or 3. Yeah, he's ripping 6 too. He doesn't give a shit.
Dude, I was going to say, this is like one of the guys that if I post a video of him smoking cigarettes, I know that the tweet's a banger. It doesn't matter what I say. Everybody just is like, this is it. Like, and he just seems to have that kind of it factor with the fan base. However, you know, this is a big step up in competition. So again, like I mentioned, a little bit cost prohibitive, but I think he's going to finish this fight more often than not. So that's the way I would lean.
There was an interview. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Please go ahead. No, go ahead.
There was an interview with Kyle Bahayo, and the guy asked him, the interview was about Prates, the whole thing. And he says to him, hey, you're his coach, you're his mentor in that gym. You're always with him. What do you think about the cigarette smoking? He's like, why would I change something that works? He likes to smoke cigarettes. I cannot change him. It doesn't slow him down in the cage. He has good cardio. He's like, hey, he goes out and smokes a cigarette every once in a while. I can't stop him. He said, would he be better without it? I don't know. But he goes, I can't stop him. He's still doing what he has to do in the cage. So it was just funny that they asked him, you know, what do you think about that cigarette stuff? Is that like hurting him? You're on mute.
Oh, my apologies. I was saying it's crazy because the last time he lost a fight was against Abdullayev in 2019. And that guy's still an undefeated fighter at this point. And he had a bunch of opportunities where he nearly submitted him, just couldn't quite finish the deal. So even in that fight, the guy showed he made a lot of improvements from when he was getting submitted earlier on in his career. And now he's just been doing a better job keeping the fights upright and finding his shots on the feet. So I think he's a really dangerous striker, but I think he's not a terrible grappler either. I think he can mix up the phases in this fight should he need to. But the thing he's got to protect is his chin. The Leech still has some power. That would be, I think, his biggest danger factor is he tends to come out pretty aggressive when he starts the fight. If you remember, Santiago Ponzinibbio never even got started in that fight, right? He kind of just got blitzkrieged. And I think that's what the Leech is going to try to do. But you remember, it was Ponzinibbio coming off the long layoff who was the elder statesman in that contest at the time. And now the roles have kind of reversed a little bit. And I think the Leech at plus 150 against, Muslim Salikov, an elder statesman in the division, give me that all day. I took that for 10 units, right? But this is a way different spot where I think there's a lot more danger factor on the other side in this one. And I just think you got a guy in Leech who's worthy of respect, but he's got to prove something himself here coming off of a very long layoff and honestly an uninspired performance, though I thought he should have won against D-Rod. Ian Gary kicked his head off, right? There's levels to the game. So things to remember. But in any case, we got Tai Tuivasa, Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Is Tai Tuivasa retiring, or is Tai Tuivasa getting back in the win column? It seems like those are the pertinent questions about this one. Last time out, I was not bullish on Tuivasa's chances because he's drinking beers at the WWE 2 weeks before the fight, and he's got knee braces on in the embedded. I was like, oh, good luck. You don't want to get into a takedown battle with Marcin Tybura with that knee brace on. But I think that when I look at, Tai Tuivasa, the one time I bet on him big in his career, 5 units against Derek Lewis, because Derek Lewis goes out there to swing and bang on the feet. And Tai Tuivasa has a good ability to go out there, land low kicks, land punches on the feet, and give himself an honest chance. He says, I'm a banger from West Sydney. I'll bang on with anybody. That's about the ceiling to his game, right? If you want to wrestle, you want to grapple, you're going to win. But that's not what I think we expect from Jairzinho most of the time. He says he wants to try and mix it up a little. I mean, I just don't see him as a great threat in that department. I don't know that he'd have success there. So ultimately, in a fight that I think will be won or lost on the feet, I could see the case for Rozenstruik, but at minus 2XX, I'll never be on that side if I don't see them as having grappling upside. So for me, it's an honest fight in the heavyweight division. I'd be looking at the plus money. I'd be looking at the under. I think that Tai Tuivasa in his recent fights has kind of been, let's go out there and figure it out early and just be done with it. And he comes out swinging, but ultimately, I don't think he has cardio to fight for, 15 minutes based on his physical appearance, right? So, yeah, I think that Ty's going to go out there, swing, and he doesn't care if he wins or loses. He might retire after, like his brother-in-law just did after his recent UFC fight. What do you think, Narco?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tai is just like not serious about fighting anymore. I mean, he has his own company. What is that? Like a weed company or something he owns?
Drink West. It's a beer company, I believe.
Whatever, a beer company. He has 1 million
Every
followers.
Celebrity.
Dude, he has 1 million followers. He's making money. He's got like a lot of people. Like this guy's making a lot of money outside the UFC. So that Chewy started it all, right? He's like really popular now, this guy. And you could just see it, man. He comes into these fights like nonchalant. He just doesn't give a shit. He's going to just he's going to chuck bombs. And, if it lands, it lands. If it doesn't, he's probably going to get knocked out. And it's like, okay, no problem. We'll still be friends. I'll still do a shoey after the fight and I'll make 6 figures or whatever, So I just don't. One guy is serious, in my opinion. Like Jairzinho is really serious. I could see his IG. Like the guy is like trying to work. He's trying to like get in shape and stuff. The other guy, even now, like I think it was like 4 weeks ago, he's out in the club drinking. He has beer in his hand. I'm like, bro, you got to fight in 4 weeks. You're drinking again. Like the guy is just not taking fighting serious. And I guess I could see why in a sense. Like, I mean, he's making probably 6-7 figures outside the cage. Why even take this? Why, he's probably making, I don't know. What does he make? You think 150K? I'm pretty sure they pay him pretty well because he's popular.
I probably more, honestly, because he actually does social media numbers and they actually partnered with his drinking company in Australia last time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let's just say he's making a decent buck, but he's making a lot of money outside the cage. So how much motivation does he have to go train and kill himself? And I don't think he has much. And he's shown it his last couple of fights, honestly. He's been finished in all of them in his last, 4 straight fights. They're good fighters, but like the Tybura fight was the winnable one, right? And he just goes out there and gets choked out like that. And then, meanwhile, Jairzinho, he's lost to nothing but kind of like the best guys in the division, man. Almeida, Volkov, Blades, Ngannou. That's it. I mean, it's the best guys in the division that he's losing to. And I frankly don't see how, outside of a big bonk, like how is Ty going to win this fight, man? Like, Jairzinho is just better everywhere. He's a better striker technically. He's got just as much power, if not more. He's got better durability, in my opinion, at this point. He's just a better fighter, man. He's the one taking it serious. I think it's kind of a easy W for him, to be honest. You know, I missed an early price. I wish I would have hit that 165, and I was saying, "Oh, I'm gonna hit it." Next thing you know, it's 200. I'm like, "Oh shit, freaking moved," you know. But yeah, I do think this is probably one of the better winnable fights for him, honestly, because Tuivasa just has no defense. He's just looking to big shots. Meanwhile, Jairzinho he's defensively responsible, even though he's been knocked out. The guy knows what he's doing on the feet. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, he has better cardio. You name it. I just feel like it's pretty cut and dry that, you know, Jairzinho is going to jab him up and then probably land big shots on him.
Yeah, for me, I don't want to get too tempted by the price. I actually remember, I think it's 3 times in a row, Tai Tuivasa has lost in Australia. So he started off his career hot. He knocked out Rashad Coulter, and he knocked out some other jabroni in Australia, with all due respect. And then since then, it's been all downhill from there on home soil. So, you know, you'd imagine some motivation to go out there and put something on for the home crowd. The bullish case for him is he's still just 31 years of age. And admittedly, he lost to top guys in the division, right? Against Cyril Gane. I think that's the only other fight where you could say he had positive moments. He busted up the face of Tabora and then just got killed. Volkov's huge and killed both these guys like it was no big deal. Frankly, he just like embarrassed both of them. And then you look at the other fight that he lost. I'm trying to think. Tuivasa lost to Spivak, or he lost to Spivak.
No, Sergey Pavlovich.
Yeah, exactly. He lost to Pavlovich, and honestly, I thought Pavlovich was going to kill him in that fight, just because Pavlovich is a better, faster boxer than he is, right? When I think about this fight, I think, you know, the downside of you know, the game, let's say, so to speak, of Jairzinho Rozenstruik is Francis Ngannou didn't kill him with something sophisticated, right? He killed him with ruthless, insane aggression right off the rip, where none of it made sense, right? He's just literally swinging overhand dead. And when you think about what Tai Tuivasa can bring to the table, he can replicate an overhand dead. That's kind of his calling card. But beyond that, it's just not much to offer. So I do think my guy Jewish Better shouted out the KO for Tuivasa at plus 270. I think that is basically his money line here. I don't think we're seeing 15 minutes of these two guys personally, no matter what. Because I think of a guy like Rozenstruik as he's going to low kick and throw the left hook. So he's going to put himself in range to be hit. And frankly, he's the way more motivated guy in terms of acting like a professional, but he's 36 years of age. That's why he is, because he doesn't have any time to waste, right? And he doesn't have the money that Tai Tuivasa has. So that's why he takes it more seriously. But Tai Tuivasa has gone out there and memed somebody before. He throws the flying knees up the middle. He takes some crazy chances. So I think he's going to give an honest showing for about 3.5 minutes and then probably give up. Under 1.5. That's my lean. Next up, guys, let's see what we got. We've got the featured bout of the evening, Mateusz Gamrot against Dan Hooker. And I bet 3 units on RDA last time at plus 3XX. Everybody told me I was an idiot before the fight. And honestly, I felt justified in my read after the fight. My write-up said he's going to hit him with an intercepting knee and kill him in the first round. And he did everything but, right, Narco? And I was sickened by that outcome. It's like one of those plus EV bets that doesn't cash. And that's what has me worried about this fight is if he gets the 3XX, I feel like I have to take the same shot on Dan Hooker. And then I feel the same thing could happen here because we know that Gamrot is an excellent takedown threat in volume. He's also very good with that Kimura, which is the exact position we saw, Hooker get stretched by against Islam Makhachev. We know that Gamrot is also a cardio machine, right? He could just keep doing it all night. His recoverability is great. He gets dropped in virtually every fight and just finds a way to win it anyway. That's an admirable quality, but the bill will eventually come due, and we know Hooker's got dangerous weapons up the middle. So seems like another prime candidate to test the chin and see if Gamrot's really of that ilk. And we know he's been fighting close with a lot of guys, but he's gone out there and beaten some of the best in the division, and he's fought close with just about everybody. Lost the Beneil Dariush fight by a knockdown. He was fighting very well in that spot and then got clipped. And I think that could always happen to him again. He fights close on the cards. I don't really get to the huge prices, but when somebody can shoot 11 takedowns and get on top over and over on a guy like RDA, it's a really dominant skill set, and it's hard to ignore as well. So I respect Gamrot. I think he's a great fighter, but I think he's always live to be clipped. And frankly, if you just look at the knockdown rates of these two guys, I can't get to the price, right? So for me, I think that Gamrot sub is the way that I would, assume that you'd be playing it if you're on that side, right? If you're bullish on him at this favorite price. But I think if he's not getting that, it's going to be a much more competitive fight. How about you, Narco?
Yeah, I kind of agree with almost everything you said. Only one thing with Hooker is he's really hasn't faced a relentless wrestling from anybody. Obviously Makhachev, but it was one takedown and it was over, right? The only other guy that he faced with like relentless wrestling was back in the day, and that was Jason Knight. And Jason Knight got him down 4 times. I think he went like 4 for 13 or something, 4 for 12. But that's the only, like, literally only wrestler that's going to chain takedowns or try to throw a lot of takedowns at you that he's ever fought. Outside of that, like I said, Makhachev, just basically ran him over with one. After that, like, there's been nobody that's wrestled this guy. Jason Knight, like I said, 4 takedowns. Gamrot is a better wrestler than Jason Knight is. He's got better jiu-jitsu. But yeah, he could catch him. Like we said, this guy's been knocked down many, many times in the UFC, which is kind of a red flag. But with all those knockdowns, he really hasn't been like severely hurt, right? Yeah, he's been knocked down, but he kind of, like you said, he's like, the recoverability is crazy. Like, he's back at it right away. It's like, okay, this guy got knocked down, but he's good again. It's like he's shooting a takedown again. It's taking you down, So, Hooker needs to hurt him really bad, I think, to kind of maybe have a chance at winning this fight or maybe even knock him out. And Hooker looks like he's in very good shape. He's a very good striker. I think he's a good grappler too, to be honest. I don't think his grappling is like he's a slouch or anything. The problem is he's just facing a way better grappler, right? So, yeah, for me, I mean, it's dog or pass. I can't lay this price, honestly, with Gamrot. Just seeing that he's been knocked down so many times. He's facing a very, very, dangerous striker with all his limbs, So, we saw Hooker go out there and put a freaking impressive performance out there against Jalen Turner. I mean, absolute fucking war. You want to talk about a war? That was a damn war, man. And Jalen Turner's not an easy guy to fight. Very big, very strong, can grapple, a lot of power in his hands. So that was really, really impressive from Dan Hooker, honestly. So I wouldn't be surprised if he wins here. I really wouldn't. It's just that, he needs to stuff takedowns. And there's just not enough tape out there to show me that he can stuff a lot of takedowns here because he hasn't faced many wrestlers. So I don't mind people taking a shot on Hooker, honestly. Like, if you're going to take a shot on Hooker, I wouldn't even mess with the KO because it could be one of those fights where, Hooker's winning big moments and he's still getting taken down, but he could get the scorecards that way, So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to probably play Hooker, just play his money line. It's good enough at this point. What are we looking at his money line? Is it like
it's like plus 290 best available that I'm seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any need to like kind of push your luck with KO and stuff like that. Almost 3-1. It's probably good enough if you like the Hooker side. I haven't gotten to it. I probably won't get to it just because of the lack of data. Like, I watched that fight and, he was getting taken out, but that was so long ago, Pretty sure he's improved his takedown defense since then.
Absolutely. I think that Dan Hooker is a pretty good fighter. I think he made a huge mistake trying to go down to 145. That was borne out pretty quick, getting finished by Arnold Allen. He just looked like a zombie trying to make the weight. He looked big, but it wasn't good big, right? It was like, yeah, this is uncomfortable big. And I think that when you look at how he sizes up at 155, he's a pretty damn big guy. He's got all the ridiculous tattoos that you've ever seen, but he goes out there and he fights like he has a reckless disregard for his own life, right? And that's the kind of guy that can be difficult to beat sometimes. Like for Mateusz Gamrot, his will to win is up there with the best of them. And in this fight, I do think that Dan Hooker's got a very similar will to win. Y'all go back and revisit that Islam Makhachev fight. Not only did he protest the stoppage, he's like, let him rip my shoulder off. It's my damn shoulder to be ripped off, God damn it. Like, the guy is crazy. And I think that he's willing to go out there and try and knee this guy in the head, try and defend the takedowns. And they call him the hangman because he has made a career of trying to catch people as they come in with that guillotine. And do I think he's going to guillotine Gamrot? No, but what was the way that Dustin Poirier prevented Benoit Saint Denis from living on his legs all night? He said, you want to go to my legs? I'm going to use this cage to keep myself upright. I'm going to threaten with this guillotine, start to hip in on it. And first, what was Poirier doing? He kept pulling guard with it. And then he realized, he's like, I don't need to. Get to the high elbow, make him uncomfortable. He will pull out of the exchange. Now I have a chance to rip. Now I have a chance to throw. And he landed huge shots and he killed him. And Benoit Saint Denis is a good grappler. But if you put somebody in a guillotine, it doesn't matter if they're even a better grappler than you. They have to respect it or they have to go to sleep. So Gamrot is going to be in a position where he attempts 0.1 submissions per 15 minutes. He's not that active with it. Most of the time, he's using a lot of energy to control you, to get you down, to throw big punches. He does a good job of mixing in whatever he needs to try and win the decision. But you look at him overall, he doesn't finish all that many guys. He's had a couple of fortuitous injuries. He's beaten a couple of guys that were past their prime. Holtzman's no longer with the UFC. So I think to myself, like, we've definitely seen Dan Hooker hurt. He could get hurt again here. But if he's not getting hurt, he's probably going to be in a very competitive fight where he lands more strikes over the course of 15 minutes. This is an interesting one. I think that I'm waiting to see where the line peaks, period, because I did it last time. Maybe I'll size down a little bit. I bet it big last time with RDA, but I just think that this is the kind of guy that, although he's very talented, we've seen the holes and the vulnerability. Khabib was priced at similar things when he was going against guys, but the difference was he had an ironclad chin. You'd never see the guy hurt. You never see the guy rocked. You never see the guy in a bad situation. It was all dominance. This is not that, right? Gamrot in every fight basically has some scary moments and then finds a way to grit it out. That eventually will come due. But great fight, and I do think he's an elite fighter. I just think, he's being priced prohibitively. I don't think Dan Hooker's so bad that he's just going to run him over. Let's find out. Alrighty. Next up, my man, we've got Kai Kara-France taking on Steve Erceg. It's the co-main event of the evening, and I'm surprised that the line has come in this much. I think that Kai Kara-France is a dangerous fighter. He's got power in his hands, but he's been in a lot of negative grappling positions over the course of his UFC career. I think he's clearly gotten better in those spots, but I don't think he's bulletproof in those spots. Askar Askarov was riding his back for much of the fight. And I think that if it wasn't a very anti-Russian Ohio crowd that I was a part of, and I mean, I was a part of the crowd, not I was a part of the anti-Russian bias, but I'm saying they were just booing him relentlessly in that fight. He had a ton of great positions and ultimately loses a close decision there, and he's no longer with the UFC. But Kai Kara-France has gotten jobbed out in his last decision. I thought that was a fight that could have went his way, but he came on a little bit too little too late, loses the fight to Albazi. And then you look at the fight before that, he gets finished by Brandon Moreno, who hasn't looked good hardly in a single fight since, with all due respect. So I think that there's a little bit of, memory of all the things that Kai Kara-France did on his run up, but the Askar Askarov fight was within a hair. The Cody Garbrandt fight, again, Cody has had, very little success in the recent portion of his career. Rogerio Bontorin's no longer with the company, and he got smoked by Brandon Royval. I called that fight to a T. He was actually favored in that fight, and Brandon Royval, I think, was like plus 190. I called him by guillotine in round 2, Narco. I could see the exact same fight playing out here, right? Is Erceg as crazy as Royval? No. Is he as aggressive with the grappling? Not quite. But is he similar in terms of creating a little bit of chaos and being able to answer back when he gets hit? I think he is. And I think that that's what happened in the Royval fight, right? Royval gets hit with a clean shot, and then you see Kai Kara-France get really excited, come in crazy, gets hit with a spinning elbow, and then he starts shooting takedowns. When he gets hit, he starts getting uncomfortable and starts grappling. And I think that in this fight, you didn't want to grapple with Steve Erceg. I think he's a better grappler. I think he would out-position him. I think he could out-submission him. And I think that we've seen Steve Erceg show that he's got different layers to his game. The danger is he's off a title fight. We've seen a lot of times the post-title fight letdown spot. You come off a title fight, it's not the same. It's a co-main event instead of the main event, it's this and that. I just think that Steve Erceg is a young guy who's still very highly motivated and knows I was one position away. I was one boneheaded decision away from winning against the champion in a tough spot. And I think that he's going to be a relevant player in this division for a while. So for me, I think Steve Erceg wins. And I think that the submission is live here. How about you, Narco?
Yeah, probably staying away here. I think the line's probably around right. I do favor Erceg's all-around game over Kai Kara, but I think Kai Kara is a really good striker too. He's really dangerous, actually. I think he has a lot of power, actually, for flyweight. So Erceg needs to be careful because we saw him in that fight against Costa where he got hurt pretty damn bad against Costa in that fight. So, and I know Costa throws hard too, but so does Kai Kara France. And Kai Kara is a lot more of a technical striker than a guy like Costa is. So, you know, Erceg does need to be careful on the feet. I think it's pretty damn competitive, to be honest, on the feet. You know, I think both guys are actually good strikers. Erceg has really good boxing, but he's hittable. You know, that's the one thing that you could take away from the guy, that he is hittable. And Kai Kara France, like I said, he's a good striker. When you look at kind of Erceg's run, it's been, to be fair, it's been kind of lucky. Like he got a title shot, which is amazing off of those type of wins, right? He came into the UFC, beats Dvorak, you know, on short notice, I believe it was, which is it's a fine win. Then he fights Costa, you know, decision. It was actually a close decision. I think it was 29-28. And then he beats Matt Schnell, who we know is kind of like probably done with this chin, man. His chin is dust. And then he gets a title shot, which is such a fortuitous run, to be honest. He really didn't beat anybody special and got a title shot. So that's a thing. It's a good thing, honestly, for him. But the bad thing is, like you said, like guys coming off these title losses, man, like the motivation factor, the will to kind of try to get back there again. It's not that easy. You know, it really isn't. But for him specifically, I think it might be a little different because this guy kind of came into the UFC and it's like, all right, came into the UFC in fucking June of 23 and I got a title shot in less than a year. You don't see that happening. He literally came and within a year, less than a year, he had a title shot. So, I mean, you know, his motivation is probably still there. The guy's still young. He's only 29. It's like, that was kind of like free roll. I got free rolled a title shot. Came in, boom, 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 3 wins. Here's your title shot. Now I got to get back there again, you know, and get the title shot, you know, again. And this is one of the stepping stones. You know, I do kind of lean him here. I just don't want to lay the price because I do think it's a competitive fight. I don't think he's going to like blow away Kai Kara France or anything. I do think that you're right in the grappling where, you know, maybe in some of these scrambles, he might be able to get the back take, you know, stuff like that. Because Erceg is really good with his BJJ. I think he's got really, really good BJJ. And that's what makes him. He's an all-around fighter. Very good boxer, very good BJJ, complete fighter. And that's why I think he's going to stay at the top for a while. I do think he wins this fight, but I'm just not going to lay the 160. I feel like it's probably around right.
Fair play, my brother. The one thing I wanted to mention here is I'm looking for the record of Askar Askarov, and Askarov is technically 7-0 to the sub, so nothing to sneeze at there. But I never thought of him as like the most prolific submission threat in the UFC. There's a lot of decisions, holding on to position, very tactical, but not really a very inspiring, you know, performer in that way. Kai Kara-France 3-3 to the sub. I think he's the most submittable opponent that we've seen for Erceg so far inside the octagon. Just because the other guys are a little bit more polished with their grappling, especially the champion Pantoja, one of the best grapplers in the division, wasn't able to get one over on him. I think that if you put Pantoja on, those same positions, right, and the roles are reversed, and you instead put Kai Kara-France there, I think he's finished. Right. So for me, that's kind of the difference in this fight is I think on the feet, it's very competitive, but I think on the ground, it would not be competitive personally. And when I'm looking at it, Kai Kara-France does a very good job. Like the City Kickboxing Classic, they stick the jab out, hold it in your face, and then follow up with the big shots. But Erceg's kind of a guy that counters over the top of the jab. So if you try and hold the jab in his face, he's going to be coming with a left hook or a right hook over the top, I feel. And I think it's going to land, pretty consistently on Kara-France, especially if he doesn't change up that habit that he has. Because a lot of guys are scared when you put the jab in their face, so they start backing up. And Erceg likes to box, so he's just going to be like, shift it back a little bit and then fire back over the top. And honestly, that's how he killed Schnell. And I think that Schnell is a chinny guy. So I don't think he's going to hit one shot and then, this guy's going to fall apart. But I think he could hit him one time and then make him make bad decisions. And I think once that happens, that's been the real killer for Kai Kara-France is when he gets put into a chain of negative reactions. Oh, I got hit. Things are starting to go wrong. I'm panicking, grab a bad takedown, and then I'm submitted. So that for me is what we can expect as a potential liability in this spot. Last but not least, my brother, we got the main event of the evening, the one people have been anxiously waiting for, and it's Dricus du Plessis, DDP, Still Knocks, whatever you want to call him. Call him anything but champ. He's the champ right now at 185 pounds, and he's taking on challenger Izzy. That's what they're calling him this week. Israel Adesanya, the last stylebender. He's coming back to try and claim this title, and it's a fascinating fight, Narco. I'm going to kick it over to you first. We've got a great guest, so we got to have a great breakdown on this main event. Do you have strong thoughts or feelings, my brother? It's a fascinating fight, and for me, it's been a very difficult one to call. Two guys have had opposite trajectories on their fight predictions, so I'm happy to hear what you think.
Yeah, man, it really is a hard fight to call because when you try to look at skill for skill, right? You're probably gonna say Adesanya is gonna win here, but there's other intangibles to the fight game, and those intangibles all almost belong to DDP. Like the guy is just built different, man. I mean, the strength that this guy has. The dog, you want to talk about a dog. This guy's a dog. This guy's a dog. He's going to fight till death. He's going to keep going. He looks tired in every single fight in round one. And then, 5 rounds, no problem. I'm still be pushing the pace in round 5. It's like he looks dead, but yet he still comes through. And he's had a lot of very shaky moments in the UFC. Like we talk about the Brunson fight. Like he's hurt. He's all over the place. He looks very bad in that fight, right? The other fight that he looked horrible in is against Till. Looked absolutely atrocious in that fight. He's getting hurt. He's stumbling all over the place. He's fighting life and death with Darren Till, right? But then he comes out and just smokes Rob Whittaker, right? Everybody's on, I remember, including myself, everybody's on Rob Whittaker, right? This guy's looked horrible against Till. This guy's looked horrible against that guy. Rob Whittaker, absolutely destroyed, right? Then he fights Strickland, and it's a close fight. And Strickland's a hard guy to fight. That's the thing. He's going to keep pumping out the jab. He's going to be in your face. He's got cardio for 5. And it's just a difficult matchup for a lot of, Strickland's the type of guy that if you don't knock him out early, there's no way you're just going to run him over. It's not going to be. He's just got great cardio, great volume. He's always going to be in your face. Good takedown defense, you name it. He's going to be there for 5 rounds, right? And it's going to be a tough matchup. And now Izzy comes into this fight where we know he looked awful against Strickland, right? And he looked off in general. Like it just did not look like Izzy. Now, was it the pressure from Strickland? Was it a different? The other thing is you have to take into account that this guy had a DUI like 2 weeks before that fight. I don't know how much that weighed on him. I don't know what that took out of him. It could have affected him. Getting a DUI, going to jail, or whatever happened that night. And then you got to fight 2 weeks later. It probably weighed on him a lot. Now he's been out of the cage for a little bit. He's refreshed. Is he the same Izzy that's going to come back here that fought, both times Alex Pereira? Is it the same Izzy that fought Kenan? Is it that, we don't know. That's the only thing here is like, I don't know. And if it is, I think he should be like probably 160, minus 160, minus 170, to be honest. I know there's a takedown threat from DDP. I know he's got, but Izzy's not really easy to take down. The footwork is very important. The bigger cage, Izzy knows how to use the cage, man. He's got very good footwork. It's not going to be easy to track the guy down. I know that DDP blitzes in, throws strikes. Sometimes we'll go for takedowns, but it's still not going to be easy with a Izzy that's in his prime that we've seen before, right? I don't know where he is, to be honest. I really don't. And I don't know what to make of that last fight against. I mean, him getting hurt in round 1 like that against Strickland was like, I'm like, what the heck is going on with this guy? Strickland just arm punches him and he's like fucking hurt. I'm like, wow. Strickland didn't even sit down on his punches there and he hurt him. So you don't want to get hit by DDP, I'll tell you that, because he hits a lot harder than Strickland does. And if that's like a sign of what's going on with Izzy and maybe he's like trending downwards, it's not going to be a good night for him. But I honestly don't know. It's just one of those fights where I lean Izzy because of the skill, the experience, but it's so hard to bet against this DDP guy, honestly, anymore. I just can't bet against this guy. He has all the intangibles. He's tough as nails. You hurt him and he'll keep coming. All these things is like, just no one else is built like that, really. There's not a lot of guys built like this guy. And for me, it's just going to be a pass here. I'm going to be probably rooting for Izzy to win, but yeah, it's just a complete pass. There's no need to force bets when you really don't see value, right? If I don't really think and I'm unsure of how this guy's going to come out and look, well, then I'm going to pass,
I definitely see where you're coming from. Last time that Izzy fought, I was devastated, right? Because I burnt myself trying to get cute. I had wrote up and, I basically did like an article at the beginning of the week on Patreon. And I was like looking at the main event and the co-main event. And I was gutted after the week because in that write-up, I included Volkov by sub, which hit, and I didn't bet it. And I included Sean Strickland money line at plus 500, which I did not bet. And looking back, that hurts. That hurts to identify and then not follow through. That hurts. But in any case, right, when I'm looking at the analysis, I had said to myself, let me just go with the fight, not to go the distance, because I was like, you see a guy in Izzy and people assume like this guy can't get finished. But I was like, he's a dangerous kickboxer. And he's also a guy that can get into crazy exchanges, right? He'd get hurt on the feet. Alex Pereira chased him down in round 5. Leg kicks can get to him. He could just get bothered a little bit. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, this is a prime opportunity, fight not to go the distance. I was like, what if Strickland takes him down? I was like, he knows how to do jiu-jitsu better than him. He's been doing it all his life. Maybe he just surprises him. And when he comes out and knocks him down in round 1, I felt like a genius. And when he didn't finish him and danced around him, and then in round 5, he's like celebrating with 30 seconds left, I was like, you are an idiot, dude. And by the way, the thing is, sometimes people say like, oh, enter live, let's see how it goes for a round. You can't even do that in that fight. You know why? He gets dropped instantly. It's like, oh, okay, there it goes. Minus 200 Sean Strickland. Yeah, you want that? Good luck. Enjoy that as you miss the plus 500s that just got crashed off the board. So I said I had a tale of two fighters, right? On the Israel Adesanya side, it's been a tale of overconfidence. I thought that the guy was better than he was. I thought he was going to beat Blachowicz. He got absolutely, beclowned, frankly. Like, if you go back and look, he got outlanded at distance every round of that fight. And he also got taken down multiple times and held down by a guy whose grappling was so bad that when Glover Teixeira took him to the ground, my man was in neck convulsions instantly, right? Like he before the choke's in, he's like, thanks anyways, get me out of here, right? And that had happened to him before. So Jan Blachowicz, good top player, not a great bottom player, right? And you just look at how Izzy fared in that fight. The physicality was the problem, right? That was the big problem there. And against a guy like Sean Strickland, Sean is a weirdo, right? He's kind of the same size as DDP, but he has this hand fight constant game, right? Constantly with the hand fight. And Pereira can make you pay really easily, right? So he was like touch to the body, touch to the body, touch to the body, hand fight, bing, killed him, right? And it was basically just very simple sequencing, and Pereira talked about it after the fact. But then you saw Sean train with Pereira in the lead up to the Izzy fight, and he came out, and instead of just touching with the hand, it was a touch follow. It was a touch, and so he was hitting him with the rear hand, and I think that's why he got through so easily, right? He just changed up his game a little bit. It's normally just the lead hand from Sean. He's keeping this one close to home the whole time, but he was a little bit more active with the rear hand, opened up a lot more opportunities. And I think that a guy like Dricus du Plessis, the danger factor is he's not the same pressure that Sean Strickland is. He is a guy that brings insane pressure overall, but he does it in bursts, and he just attacks people with like crazy takedown attempts. But you got to remember that I've been betting du Plessis the whole time, thinking he was a good fighter. And I have seen the crazy mistakes and the crazy moments along the way. Like when he flatbacks himself against Brad Tavares in the first round, and I have du Plessis plus 108 and the fight not to go the distance. And I'm like, my brother, what are we doing? How did we just pull Brad Tavares on top of ourselves in the first round? And it's because he takes a ton of risks. He's willing to go out there and, he's very confident. He's going for over-under throws against a big, bulky Hawaiian. It didn't make a lot of sense, but he just believes in my techniques. I'm going to go for my moves. And against Robert Whittaker, he hits a side headlock to, a Darce elbow series that ended the fight essentially in round one. So the guy is taking all these big risks, right? And when they pay off huge. But there's also times when you see the risks kind of having the negative consequences come back to bite him. I bet Darren Till against him. That's the only time I ever bet against du Plessis in the UFC. I had him plus 108 against Strickland. I had him plus 300 against Whittaker. I have been on the train. But I was like, man, Darren Till, he's got good intercepting strikes. I was like, he's got decent physicality up top, right? He's not a small man. And so I was like, he's probably going to be able to keep some competitive positions. And you saw blitzing attacks from Robert Whittaker get punished by Darren Till with that elbow, and literally Robert Whittaker hit the deck, woke back up, and he was like, golly, it's time to start doing something else different. Hit him with a bunch more kicks, stayed a little bit more on the outside instead of coming in with the boxing combinations. And for du Plessis, I know people are mocking there until I had my fun at his expense as well. Saying this is the guy giving unsolicited advice to Izzy, and he gets taken down to a flat back full mount. That is literally the Darren Till special, guys. No wrestling coach will ever say, when you're about to get taken down, concede the full mount. And it's just unbelievable. He did that against Brunson. He did that against du Plessis as well. But Izzy isn't that bad of a grappler. The one thing I will say about him that has been a real eye-opener is I thought, my guy Derek Brunson was going to give him a problem. That was where I thought we could see the rubber meet the road. And if you remember that fight, Narco, he could hardly get close. The footwork was so good, and he was punishing him constantly for chasing him down. So that is the one thing. We have seen examples in the past of Izzy punishing a guy who wants to aggressively chase after the hips, wrestle, get into the pocket, and it was knees that closed the show there. So I do think Izzy's shown that he has the skills, but he's 35. He's been out for a while, and he's got a guy who's a hellacious fighter. I think the plus money on DDP made sense. I get why people took that, but I also just have to look at the fact that Israel Adesanya has been favored every fight he's been in. If he didn't have a DUI last time out against Strickland, do people feel the same way about a rematch line? Is he a dog going into the rematch with Strickland? I don't think so. So I think that for all those reasons, makes it hard for me to be bullish on either side here. I've been too hyped on Izzy in the past and lost a lot of money backing that opinion, right? And then meanwhile, on the du Plessis side, he's paid me back over and over, but I've seen the warning sign. So for me, I lean towards the fight not to go the distance, and I literally bet that last fight for Izzy and lost the money. So I would have bet the same thing in the Strickland and du Plessis fight. I picked du Plessis inside the distance. I wouldn't have picked him to win a split decision where he gets outlanded by 40 significant strikes. I honestly wouldn't. So for me, I've been surprised by both these guys over and over. Do I need to put money behind a opinion on that? I'm not sure. If it gets to plus money on either side that's significant, that's what would get my attention, plus 125 or better. But I don't know that we're going to see that. I think this is going to close at a pick'em, and I think that that's probably close to appropriate based on what we know now. We know that Izzy, again, has the skill, but the willpower, the 30-year-old, the guy who really wants to be out there right now and doesn't have any alternatives, right? Izzy could just go be an influencer and fuck off and do his thing. He's 35 and rich and happy. Du Plessis is still trying to make a martial arts legacy right now today, and that could be the difference maker. But ultimately, fun fight, great scrap, and I appreciate your time, my brother. Let's get you out of here and say thank you very much. Narco, where can the people find you besides on the great Lambo Plays show, which is on YouTube. Guys, find it, NarcoCop, and all the links, by the way, in the description below. Please tell the people where they can find you, my brother.
Yeah, NarcoCop on Twitter. Most of them are probably following, and I thank them. NarcoCop MMA on YouTube. Show is probably not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be Saturday morning with Timothy Troiano, just because anniversary, me and my wife, 15 years. So we're going out. No Lambo tomorrow night. It's going to be Saturday, probably morning, about maybe 1 o'clock Eastern. So that's when we're going to have it. Appreciate all you guys. Appreciate everybody in chat. And thank you for having me, Liam.
Absolutely, brother. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate everybody who's sharp rocking with us in the chat. A lot of heavy hitters, a lot of common, recurring friends of the show. I appreciate all you guys. It's great to have our guy Mike back on the show. Happy anniversary, my brother. That's an absolute achievement in and of itself. So enjoy that time. Make sure that you guys are there for a special time now, Saturday. Show some love, show some support, and I'll be there in the chat as well. God bless. Peace, love, and chicken grease, guys. Everybody, good luck on your bets, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care.